Okay, so hello everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces in the call, but for anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Linus Kilius, part of the management team, and I'm working out of our new Kingston branch. I also developed and administer the Spotlight program, so I've had interactions with a lot of you in the past as well from that capacity. I've also had over 12 years of past experience professionally as a software developer, which leans perfectly into what I'm going to be talking about today. And this is something that I actually want to do a seminar about for a while now, because over the years I've talked to like dozens of people, mostly real estate agents, that have been the victim of hackers, scammers, online identity theft, whatever you want to call it. You name it, I've probably seen it. And every single one of those situations that I've come across has been more or less avoidable, right? Getting hacked or scammed or whatever you want to call it online, it's one of those things like you don't really think too much about until it's actually happened to you, right? But when it does, it can turn your world upside down, and it's really preventable, and that's what I want to kind of get across today. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to prepare you so that you're like equipped to avoid getting scammed. It's so incredibly common these days. Like I think that if you don't take precautions, it's not like a matter of if you're going to get scammed, it's just a matter of when it's going to happen. If you haven't been scammed in the past or hacked or whatever, you probably know like dozens of people that have, right? So these are just important things to consider. Okay, so it only took me one slide to get thrown a Dr. Evil picture, and I'm really sorry I couldn't resist. It's just too much fun. I'm going to try and scare you a bit, though. I guess kind of what the point of this presentation is a little bit, to scare you into like taking a little bit of action. So to start doing that, I'm going to let you know what hackers can do. You might know a few of these, you might not. But it's important to know what they're capable of, because it's important to know what you're trying to defend yourself against. They can take control of your email. This is probably the most common thing. Again, you've probably seen this, heard of this happening before. The next most common, maybe they're neck and neck, I don't know the stats on it, is stealing your credit card information. A lot of people have had their credit card information compromised and had those purposes pop up on your statements that you just don't know where they came from, right? Very common. They can also compromise your computer, scan for sensitive information. They can monitor your activity. They can even lock you out of your computer and hold it for ransom. That's called ransomware. I've got one agent I've been talking to that has hard drive encrypted. They're actually holding it for ransom for about like $3,000 worth of Bitcoin. I might get into that story a little bit later, but like these things happen. They happen all the time. And here's like a really creepy one. It's less common, but like makes my skin crawl whenever I think about it. I just wanted to make sure I post it up here. Is hackers can actually take control of your webcam too, and they can watch or record you. And that's definitely like the most invasive privacy one on the list. And like I said, it gives me the creeps every time I think about it. There's a lot of other nasty things too that hackers can do. Like I won't get into like everything. It's probably impossible to get into everything, but at least I'm going to go over the most common ones with you today. So one thing I want to go over first is a very common misconception. Most people think that you get hacked because your computer isn't secure, right? And the thing is, that's actually not true at all. Computers are incredibly secure. The weak link in the getting scammed chain is actually the people that are using the computers. Most hackers actually rely on tricking people into giving them information they want. It's called social engineering. You've probably heard about it before. And as far from like exclusive from online hacking, you've probably been familiar, how you've probably even received them yourself, getting like text messages or scam phone calls, trying to like pry information out of you. It's the exact same thing. It's all the same. People try and take advantage of people that are vulnerable. And that's where most internet scams or hackers kind of come in. So Dr. Evil a couple slides ago, now it's Weird Al Yankovic in a tin hat. One of my favorite parody singers from when I was younger. I came across this picture and I had to add it, but I mean, it's applicable. Tin hats, paranoia, right? One really good way to avoid getting hacked, to prevent becoming a victim of like these social engineered scams, is just to be paranoid in general. I know it sounds like kind of weird advice, but if you start with the assumption that most things online are a scam, you'll be on the lookout for these suspicious situations. My kids are actually like really amazing. They're like 10 and 12, right? And I've trained them to like assume everything's a scam online. It's pretty hilarious. The stuff they show me, like, oh, this is a scam, Dad. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Good job, son. It's the best default mode to be in. I mean, I guess my youngest actually did fall for an online scam last week. We had to format his computer like to fix the problem. So maybe it's not the best example, but you get the idea. They're definitely learning. Anyhow, my point is if you're constantly on the lookout for scams, it'll reduce your online risk. And that's kind of the idea about it. Just kind of get in that mode. It's important. Don't be naive. So being paranoid or vigilant is some good like overarching advice, but I'm gonna get into some more specifics. And there's three main things that I want to go over for the bulk of this presentation. Number one, I want to show you that what the most common scams are that are out there, so you know what to look for. It's a little easier to identify something if you know what you're looking for. Number two, just knowing about online scams is enough, right? Everyone makes mistakes and hackers are pretty smart. So it's important that you take some preventative steps. And there's some really easy ones that everyone should be taking to reduce this risk. And finally, like no one's perfect, right? Even taking all precautions, you still might be the victim of online scams or hacking. So I want to talk about the best ways or steps you can deal with different situations if it happens to you. Yeah, so let's start with number one, which was just identifying or being able to identify common scams. Most common scam or hack, or I'm going to use these terms interchangeably throughout this presentation, whatever you want to call it, is something called a phishing scam. I'll get into the details about what that is in a second. The other two that I want to talk about a bit is identity theft or online impersonation. Use those interchangeably too. That's very common. And finally, malware, or you just call this one computer viruses. Again, like kind of interchangeable terms here. So let's start with phishing. It's phishing with a PH, not with an F. Not sure where the term originally from. Not sure if anyone actually knows, but it's basically like a hacker, like literally fishing for information. And in this scenario, you're the fish, right? The scam involves tricking a user or you into revealing sensitive information. It's usually passwords or credit card information. And you might think it's easy to like avoid this. You're like, I'm not dumb enough to give a hacker my credit card number, right? But you'd be surprised. Like a lot of these scams are surprisingly convincing. Okay. Particularly dangerous is if a hacker gets control of your email and your email password, right? This is where things can snowball quickly. And you might not realize how bad this can get, but I want you to think about something and just to kind of give you an example. Have you ever emailed your credit card information to someone before? Like maybe your husband or wife or a friend or like your kids or something? Like I know most of you have. I've probably done it before, right? Well, if a hacker gets control of your email, the first thing they do is actually scan all your emails for credit card numbers. Like credit card numbers follow a standard format. It's really easy to search for them. Right? I talked to an agent last week. I haven't checked, but he's probably actually on the call right now. We were talking about this stuff, and this happened to him like literally last week. The hackers started racking up charges on his credit card while like spam bombing his email account. They got probably access to his credit cards through his email. It's really nasty business. They can also scam for other things like passwords and some sensitive information if there's something they're targeting. And maybe the worst part too is if they control your email, one thing that typically happens is they'll start emailing everyone on your contact list to like these scam emails, trying to perpetuate the scam. So your friends, family, clients, like there's going to like the last thing you want is like, infect your client's computer or compromise their email accounts. Right. And like, this is what they do. And the cycle just continues. Like I said, it's a nasty business and it's like a nightmare to sort through all this stuff. So one quick piece of advice that kind of goes along that you probably gleaned from the story already, never email credit card information, passwords, usernames to anybody. The best way to give credit card information to somebody, if you need to pass it along and you're not doing it in person, is probably just do it over the phone, right? That's just the most secure way. If you do it online, like especially through an email, you're exposing yourself to potential future fraud. Right? And it's not because they're intercepting the emails. It's because if they get access to your email account, that's where they can find the information. Okay, so what's a phishing scam look like? I think the most common one is an email with a fake link. Like they can look like very genuine too. Usually the email you get is from either like an obviously fake email address, but sometimes it's from like a trusted person, right? Like it might be like Tina sending you something. They're like, oh, you got to open this important document, right? Turns out it's not actually from Tina. It's actually from a hacker who assumed Tina's account. And this is what can make things especially hard to kind of filter out. So you need to be really aware of it. Most of these emails would have something like a Google Drive link or a PDF attachment or an attachment of some sort that it wants you to click on, right? Like in the pictures here, I've got two kind of examples I just found on the internet, right? Like it'll be like, hey, like you need to open this document here, click on this link. Like and it looks like a Google link and it says it's a Google link, but it's not actually a Google link, as an example. Instead of actually taking you to the document, what it does is it takes you to like a fake login page that looks exactly like a Google login page. It's not hard to fake these things. Like here, I've got an example on the screen here. Two different Google sign-ins. One's a fake one, one's a real one. I guarantee you can't tell which one's which, right? Turns out the one on the left's the fake one, the one on the right's the real one. But my point is that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference by visually like looking at the aesthetics on the screen, right? So the thing is here too, like let's say you click on that, and you're like, okay, well, I need to open up the email, the document that Tina sent me. Oh, okay, I just got to log into Google first. You put in your email, you put in your password, and guess what? Like you didn't actually give it to Google, you gave it to the hacker. You just handed them your username and password, and there you go, your email's compromised. Okay. It's definitely one thing to be aware of. Be very suspicious, especially if something's out of context or doesn't have much context involved. Like contact the person and see if it's a legitimate thing before doing something like that. And if it takes you a login screen, or in some cases, like what I'm showing you here on the screen, like asking for credit card information, that's like a huge red flag. So it's often just like a link like that where it tries to get you log into something, but it can also be something like from like PayPal, like we need, or Netflix, we need to update your credit card information so we don't, your account doesn't get canceled or whatever. A lot of those too, instead of phishing for passwords and email and usernames, they're actually looking for credit card information. So just kind of keep an eye out for those. I don't think this is as common as the login one, but still it can happen. And you know what? There's probably a million other ones that are going to crop up either that I don't know about or might crop up in the future. So just again, the best advice is just to be paranoid and be vigilant. If something seems suspicious, it probably is. So there's a couple ways to spot these phishing scams. And hackers are they're very sneaky and they can mask a lot of these sometimes, but this at least helps you figure out some red flags that you can notice to help confirm if something's a scam. The first one is if something takes you to a page, right, that has log information or asks for credit card information. This is anywhere too. It might not even be through an email like attachment. You should always check the URL, like the address of the website you're on, and just make sure there's a few things. If you're logging into Google or you're logging into PayPal or something, make sure it's google.com or paypal.com at the top. A lot of these like fake websites, they'll look exactly like PayPal or Google, but the website address will be something like goggle.ru, right? Like they might try and make it look similar, so at a glance it would pass the sniff test. But if you look closely, you're like, okay, that's obviously not Google, right? If you spot that, it's an obvious scam. The other things to look for as well is the little lock icon in the top left. I pointed it out here with a little arrow here, as well as where it says HTTP://. You want to make sure there's an S on the end of the HTTP. So HTTPS://. That S is pretty important. What that actually means is you're using a secure transfer protocol. So anything that you're sending to the internet and you're receiving is actually encrypted end to end. So even if someone does like sniff your information along the way, it's just gobbledygook to them. They can't like decrypt it basically. Right? It's important, especially important. Like not all websites have this. In most cases, it doesn't matter, but you want that lock in the HTTPS if you're ever like putting in credit card information or logging into something, making sure that's there so you know that your information is at least a little bit more secure. If you don't have these three things lining up, like the domain doesn't match, you don't have that little lock thing, and it's not HTTPS, like it's more red flags, right? The more red flags, the more suspicious you should be. Okay, so that's phishing. Next thing I'm going to talk about is social media impersonation or identity theft. This one's a weird one, and I've seen it happen a lot, and it tends to happen mostly on social media, but it can happen in other places. It happened to my mother-in-law like just a couple months ago. Someone actually was sending messages to all her friends. Maybe you've seen this situation too. It's very common from what appeared to be her account. Okay. Turns out those messages weren't actually from her account, but they were from someone who set up a fake account to mimic hers, right? It was impersonation. They made a profile with her name. They took her profile picture, which is publicly available, right? And they used that so people would recognize the profile picture. Then this impersonating account send messages to like all of her friends, mimicking this like distress situation where they need to send money right away because I'm in trouble or whatever, right? My mother-in-law, she thought, hey, my account's hacked, right? Because people were telling her like, oh, your account's hacked, your account's hacked. I'm getting these like weird messages from you, just so you know. But turns out it actually wasn't. Her Facebook account was actually completely fine. The one thing that she did wrong, and this is something that I suggest everyone go check. This is Facebook, Instagram, like anything social media oriented that have similar settings like this, is to go and make sure that your friends list isn't public. Okay. I've got on the screen here like a little screenshot of what the settings look like in the privacy settings for Facebook. You want to make sure that you send it so like who can see your friends. You want to make sure it's only your friends or maybe nobody. It's up to you, but like just make sure that doesn't say public. Because what happens is if that's public, so anyone can come on you if they're not friends with you. Like in this case, a hacker could come. They could take a look at Tina's profile, be like, okay, there's her picture. This is her name. These are all her friends, right? I know who she trusts and who trusts her, presumably, right? And I can send messages to all of them and try and abuse that trusting relationship. So if you hide your friends list, that hacker wouldn't have any motivation to assume your identity. There's no reason to. There's no connections they can take advantage of. So if this ends up like happening to you or anyone that you know, like definitely like the easiest thing to do is you can check out the profile of the person that's messaging you, because anyone can like message people on Facebook unless you set your DMs to only friends. And same thing with like all the other social media accounts as well. So that's another way you can kind of shore this up. But if you do get a message like that that's suspicious, check out their profile page. If they've got no posts, nothing, just like a profile picture and like a name, it's probably a scam account, right? Tell your friend, whoever sent it to you, like call them on the phone or message their real account, and just like let them know what happened, right? You can educate them. And maybe just tell them to turn off their friends list or whatever from public to private. Most people, when they see this, they knee-jerk react. They're like, okay, my Facebook account's hacked. They report it to Facebook. That's what my mother-in-law did too. She reported to Facebook. I wish she talked to me first. She usually talks to me about this kind of stuff, but she didn't talk to me first. She reported to Facebook and locked her account. We had to like unlock it. It was like very kind of like a messy situation to get access back to her account. But generally, it's not even like that your account's hacked. So it's just something to like look out for. It's, like I said, it's very common. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is malware. Malware, viruses, there's all sorts of different names you can call for this. Malware is kind of a catch-all term for like a malicious computer program. Like I said, you can call it a virus too. It's essentially the same thing. Malware can be malicious apps, web browser extensions, which are add-ons to like Google Chrome. They could be programs that run in the background on your computer that you like never even notice. Like you might have a virus right now that's like completely like silent in the background doing something malicious, right? I actually had one of these about a year ago, maybe a couple of years ago. It was mining Bitcoin. My computer was mining Bitcoin and sending it like whatever like Bitcoin it got to like a Russian Bitcoin address. And like, who knows how long that was happening on a computer. I just happened to come across it by happenstance, right? Some websites can actually send you desktop notifications. You might get that sometimes, like, Gmail wants to send desktop notifications, right? And you maybe say, okay, because it's convenient, but some other websites are less reputable than Google trying to send you desktop notifications. They can send you malicious things too that seem like they're coming from your operating system. There's probably a bajillion other things too, but like these are some that kind of came to mind. And I'll go over these a little bit in a second. But again, in almost all cases, this malware that's installed on your computer or activated on your computer, whatever you want to call it, it's done because you as a user did something by accident, unintentionally, or not really realizing what you were doing, and you installed this program or whatever that had some malicious code in it. It's not because your computer wasn't secure enough. So you can easily avoid malware, viruses. The best advice I can give you is to only download and install files and programs from trusted sources. App stores are great. They all scan for things, and like they shut down any sort of reported viruses pretty quickly. Reputable websites, if you download something from like Microsoft's website, right, or like the site of the person who makes like this program that you know is legit, like that's perfectly fine. Most malware viruses, they originate from less savory websites. Usually the ones with like with more like questionably legal things. I'll leave it up to your imagination of what I'm talking about. I mean, there's like a ton of dark, creepy corners on the internet, but if you're downloading files or programs from places like this, like you're just asking for trouble. A program might seem legit too, like other people might rave about it in like forums and stuff or whatever, but they may have viruses that are piggybacking on whatever you're downloading. So this is just something to try and avoid wherever possible. Malware can also be found in nasty email attachments. This is like those phishing scams I was talking about earlier. Like instead of a link, it actually is an attachment, right? The attachment might be a file or a PDF with a virus in it. It may be emailed to you from a person that you know. Again, Tina's been doing a lot of these virus emails and stuff recently, right? Like if her account's been hacked, she might be sending to you. They always try and prey on people you trust, right? Usually these are easy to spot though. Right. Like if your friend John that you haven't been talking to in a couple of years or whatever, he's probably not sending you files like that seem like really out of context with these random attachments. So like if it doesn't pass the sniff test, just be paranoid, be suspicious. The context doesn't match the situation, contact the person. See if like that file they're trying to send you or the program they're trying to send you is actually legit. It might be, right? But you know what, even if they didn't intend to send it to you, like they probably like to know if their email account's been compromised, or maybe they already know, right? And they can tell you. So sometimes like an attachment might seem legitimate, then you download and you click on it, and it might ask you for things like, administrative access or certain permissions, like as you're trying to install. I'm sure you've seen that, especially if you use Windows before when you try to install something. Like this is a big red flag. So be paranoid, be suspicious if you see that happening. And I mentioned PDF attachments too. Like they can be malicious as well. My suggestion there, if you got someone who emailed you a PDF in Gmail, right? And we all use our central own emails, so we all use Gmail. You can actually click to preview it before you download, and that's probably just best practice. If you try and click on it and it's like preview not available, or it doesn't detect that it's actually a PDF, like Google doesn't, then that's probably another place to know that there might be a red flag there. Okay, another one that's pretty common, this is the one that happened to my son last week, is Google Chrome extensions can actually be malicious. These extensions are like add-ons for your browser. There's programs that are attached to your browser. And I have no idea how my son got it, but typically if something prompts you to install an extension on Chrome, be a little paranoid and ask why. Like if it's not something you're intentionally trying to install, especially. Malicious Chrome add-ons can actually redirect you to fake login pages, which is similar to the phishing stuff I was talking about before, trying to steal your passwords or whatever. Or in my son's case, what it was doing was actually creating desktop notifications saying he's got a virus. You've got a virus. The world's burning. You need to download this special tool and pay us like $50 to remove it or whatever. Usually, if you see a notification or a pop-up anywhere, like on websites or from your desktop, and if it screams like, hey, the world's burning, like you gotta do this now, you gotta send us money, like that's almost always a scam. Is a huge red flag that something's going on. So if you suspect that you've got a nasty Chrome extension, usually like you've got pop-ups happening on your computer, you can't explain where they're coming from, go into your browser and go to Chrome and type into the web where you type in websites, typically on the top, Chrome:// extensions. You can also go into like the settings and then you can go to Chrome, manage Chrome extensions, but just going to this website is the easiest one to do. And it should list all the different extensions that are installed on your computer. Usually there's one that doesn't belong and you just remove it, right? There are some pretty nasty extensions that hijack this extensions manager page and make it so that if you try and go to it, it sends you to a different page, making it like impossible to remove extensions. And that's what happened to my son. Those cases are a lot more difficult to fix and can actually require you to, wipe your hard drive and reinstall your operating system in some cases. So they can be pretty nasty. Okay, hopefully I've scared everybody enough to want to take preventative measures, because that's what I'm going to be talking about now. I mentioned first was I being able to identify things. Next is taking the steps required to avoid getting scammed or hacked. So here, this is what I'm going to go through here. And I'll go through these each individually. Two-factor authentication, keeping software up to date, using password managers. I'm going to talk a little bit about antivirus software as well. So I'm going to start with the most important. I can't stress this enough. Two-factor authentication is so important. If you don't listen to anything else I say today, and I don't blame you, because some of the stuff I talk about is pretty boring, two-factor authentication is the most important precaution you can take to protect your email or any other like accounts online from getting hacked. Okay. Taking this one step, and it takes literally like 30 seconds to a minute to do, almost eliminates the chance of you getting hacked. It's like essentially zero. If you haven't done this, do it today. Make a note on your notepad or wherever, tattoo it on your forehead. Like, make sure you do this as soon as we're done in this presentation. I almost say it's so important you can just leave the presentation now and go do this. It's that important. Okay. So what's two-factor authentication? You've probably come across this before, right? I know a lot of you are with Treb, right? So you've got an authenticator app on your phone, or maybe you still got like one of the little fobs. I'm not sure if they still have those anymore, where you like press the button and it comes up with like the little one-time code or whatever that lasts for 30 seconds. That's two-factor authentication. In order to get access to that account, in this case, Treb, Stratus, right? You need two factors to authenticate that you are who you say you are. You need a password. That's one factor. And you need your authenticator app or like little key fob, right? If you don't have both, you can't get in. It's two factors. You need two things. Now, Treb's implementation of two-factor authentication is like literally one of the most annoying things I've ever had to deal with. So don't let that turn you off of how it works, because Google, Apple, Microsoft, they do it way better. It's a lot less painful, and you actually don't actually have to deal with an authenticator app or anything very often at all. Okay. So don't let Treb sour you to two-factor authentication. One of the coolest things about two-factor authentication, you can literally email your password to a hacker and it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't be able to get into your email, right? Because they have the password, but they don't have the second factor, like the authenticator or whatever, to get access to the account. So they have the password. It doesn't matter. You can post it online. You can tell everybody you want. They wouldn't be able to get access to your account unless they have your phone or authenticator. Right? That's what makes this so secure. Unless you're like, James Bond level, like no one's trying to steal your phone to get access to your accounts. And even if they steal your phone, they don't have your passwords, right? They need both. So it's a very rare situation where someone is targeting you enough to get your password and physically steal your phone, right? And even if they steal your phone, they need to know your PIN or face scan it or whatever. So it increases your security drastically. So I'm quickly going to run through how to do this for a Google account. And again, you can do this for Microsoft, Apple, they all have it. The only reason I'm going through it for Google is because your Century 21 emails are administered through Google, like you use Gmail through Century 21's email accounts. So I can just go through the process, and you should do this for not only your work account, but any other accounts that you use. Okay, so step one, I'm trying to make this as easy as possible. Just go to Gmail, right? And in the top right, I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about here. You'll have your little personal icon, right? It'll be the first letter of your first name if you don't have a picture, but if you do have a profile picture uploaded, it'll be that profile picture of you. And you click on that, it'll fly out this little window, and that's where step two comes in. You want to click on manage your Google account. Okay. You want to click on that. This is all recorded too. So when this pops up on the Century 21 training channel, you can come back to this if you don't worry about writing all these steps down or anything right now. The next step, once you go to manage your Google account, it'll take you in your account settings. On the left side, there'll be one tab for security. You want to click on that. That's step three. And then they'll bring up your security page. And if you look down, it's not usually at the top, it's a few panes down, but you'll see this this spot that says two-step verification, right? And it'll say off or on. It says off, you want to make that turn on. So you click on it. And then when you click on that, it'll start the setup process. So you go through the steps. One of them, like it's just clicking next a couple of times, one of them will ask you what you want to use for your second factor authentication or your second step, right? You got your password. That's the first step. Now it asks you what you want to use for the second step, right? Like your authenticator or whatever. There are actually a bunch of ways you can do this too. Google gives you a lot of options. You just notice on that page, like I put a little arrow to it. There's like show more options in the bottom because there actually are several thgs you can choose from. And it's not super obvious at first, but make sure you click on those if you want to do something different. So there's if you're using an Android device, because Google administers Android. If it's a modern Android device, it can actually send a notification to your phone. It'll say like approve or deny. So you put in your password and it'll be like, bloop, someone tried to log in from this like location or whatever. Do you approve or deny this login request? And if it was you, you obviously hit approve. If not, there's something up, so you hit deny. But another option is you can use an authenticator app, which is similar to one that Trab has for clarity. You can have Google text you a text message code, like a one-time code when you try and log in. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that on different sites too, like verifying your phone number, right? Sending a text message. That one's probably one of the easiest ones to understand. And if you don't feel comfortable with any of the other ones, like that's the one I just default to, especially if you're not techie. Just getting a text message is easy. Everyone can do that, right? Especially if you're a real estate agent, you have a phone. Another option is you can use a security key. I wouldn't worry about that one. Like chances are you don't have a security key. There's these like physical security keys you can plug into your USB port on your computer. Anyway, you can choose whichever one makes sense to you. Like I don't want to make those decisions for you. But again, if you're not really comfortable with any of them, just choose a text messaging option. Okay, so then you follow the rest of the steps in this little wizard. It'll verify that everything works. And then you've got two-factor authentication turned on, and now you're super safe. At least your email account or whatever account is you're doing this for is super safe. Now, the first time you log in on a new computer or phone or whatever into your Google account in this case, it'll ask you like, okay, check the text message we just sent you, and you have to put that text message in as well as your password. Right. But once you do it for a device, there's usually a little checkbox. Trust this device. Click on that. Then it'll never ask you for the second factor authentication on that device again. Okay. So it's not like Treb where you got to do it every time. Right. You just do it once when you first set it up. And then you never have to worry about it again. So it's not nearly as annoying. Right. I don't know why Treb doesn't do that. Total peace of mind. Right. Again, this is the best thing you can do if you haven't done it already. 100%. The first thing you should do once this seminar is done. Another proactive thing you should make sure you do, keep all your software up to date. Operating systems like Windows or Mac OS, iOS or Android, if you're on your phone, right? Web browsers, Chrome, Edge, Safari. Like I know that little update button can be annoying sometimes. Oh, I got to restart my computer, all that kind of stuff. But it's worthwhile doing. Don't leave it for too long, because these companies they patch security holes, right? So one of the reasons a lot of these updates happen is because they're patching a known security flaw. So if you don't do that update, you're leaving your computer open to whatever flaws they've patched in that update. If you have an external hard drive that's connected to the web, they're called NASs or network accessible storages. I know a lot of real estate agencies have used those in the past for like backing up stuff. Make sure you update its software regularly too. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because the agent I mentioned earlier that had their computer locked and like ransomed for like $3,000 worth of Bitcoin, that's because he had an external hard drive that was connected to the internet. He was like so tech savvy. He's like, oh, this is great. I can like access all my like deal paperwork from like anywhere, just like online, right? I can do it through the web or whatever. Well, it turns out hackers could too. They exposed a vulnerability in this external hard drive software. He hadn't updated it in years, right? So he didn't actually update the patches that would have fixed this problem because like he's like I never like actually go and like log in and like update the software, but it's something you should do. So it was just an exploit that was sitting around for a while that could have been avoided, right? This is all like very nasty business. Last thing you want to do is like have things ransomed, right? And have to pay Bitcoin to like a shady Bitcoin address. Okay, so the next big piece of advice, and I'm sure a lot of you are guilty on this one, use different passwords for every website. So why does this matter? Sorry, someone's needs to mute their microphone. I'm not sure if you can see who that is, Tina. If you can mute them, if
Yeah,
you don't
I
mind.
got it. Yeah.
Awesome. You're on it. I shouldn't even stop because I know you saw that and you were on it too. So, but anyway, so back to the presentation. Use unique passwords for everything. This is very important, and it's an annoyance for a lot of people. And I get to know some ways how to mitigate that annoyance, but I'm going to explain why this matters and why it's important. You've probably heard of companies getting compromised, like in the news, by hackers all the time. Like, oh, like, you know, like company A or B just had this like data security breach or whatever. Or maybe you got an email being like from, because they're required to, right? If something you've got an account with has been breached, they send you an email saying, okay, like you should probably change your password. Anyways, regardless, like of what their situation was, like they got hacked. Maybe when their employees fell for a phishing scam, right? But in some of these cases, like user data will be exposed, and that could be usernames and emails and passwords. So usernames and passwords. So if a hacker gets access to these lists, and often like these exposed companies that have their databases compromised, they'll just be like, all this stuff will be posted online. You can actually like, there's websites you can look at to see if like your information's been compromised online. In most cases, like you have been to like one extent or another. But let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say Etsy was the one that was hacked. Okay. I love using Etsy, especially around like Christmas. I get Christmas ornaments. Don't tell my wife I got a nice Christmas ornament from Etsy. But let's say you use your Gmail address to log into Etsy, right? And you use a password to log into Etsy that happens to be the same one as your Gmail address. Or sorry, the same one that you use to access your Gmail, right? Well, if Etsy gets compromised and someone has access, okay, like, well, we know that Linus logs in with his work email, right? And we've got this password. Let's try putting those into Google and see if he uses the same password for Google. And if he does, and this is very common, then all of a sudden your email is compromised, right? So like, you can be as like careful about all the other stuff I talked to you about, but then if some other third-party website that has nothing to do with Gmail gets cracked because you use the same password, you might get compromised that way. Again, two-factor authentication, that plugs this hole. Because like if you have two-factor authentication, it doesn't matter if they have your password because they don't have your phone, right? Or the authenticator or whatever you need to use for that second factor. So that's just one thing I really want to stress. Don't use the same passwords, especially the password you use for your email account anywhere else. Very important. So unless you're Rain Man, and I know I'm not, my memory can be horrible sometimes, remembering a unique password for every site, great thing, but remembering them is next to impossible, right? So the best solution to overcome this is to use a password manager. Apple has one built into their operating systems called Apple Keychain. Google's got one built into Chrome. It's called Google Password Manager. There's some absolutely amazing third-party ones. These are like regularly security audited and like they're very secure. I use Bitwarden. It's one on the list here. There's also LastPass, which I've used in the past, and 1Password is another common one. I believe that's a Toronto-based one as well. These third-party ones like Bitwarden, LastPass, and 1Password, they do cost money. Typically, some of them don't, but it's not a ton, and it's definitely worth it if you use a lot of devices. Like if you're not like fully Apple. If you're fully Apple, like use Apple Keychain. It's like a no-brainer. But if you like have like an iPhone, but you use Windows or whatever, like in those cases, it might be best to use one of these third-party ones because they have a lot more cross-compatibility. Bitwarden's amazing. I definitely recommend it to anybody, but LastPass is great too. So use those, make unique passwords for everything. The great thing about LastPass is you have like a master password. You put in, then you just have access to all your passwords, and you can like autofill for websites and stuff too, which is actually pretty convenient and takes a lot of the hassle out of having to like be like, oh, what was my password for that website again, and deal with all that situation. Highly recommend. Okay, antivirus software. I told you I was going to talk about this a little bit. Windows, Macs, any like modern operating system, those are like the main two. They have antivirus protection baked in. It's pretty amazing too. Windows Defender is on Windows. I've got that in the little corner of my screen here right now. And they protect your computer pretty well against any sort of threats like malware, like that kind of thing, right? So you can get away with just these. And for most people, that's perfectly fine. I don't use antivirus software at all. However, if you choose, you can pay for third-party antivirus software, but most people don't really need it. Okay. These antivirus solutions, they're like usually a little redundant. They do the exact same thing as like the built-in operating system ones. But their business model is like kind of profiting off fear, if that makes sense. They charge you and they like try and nickel and dime you for like these added features or whatever. And they can add an extra layer of security. Some of them can help prevent against phishing attacks or things like that. But they can also bog down your system, make things slower, and be more annoying than helpful. So just something to think about. You don't have to subscribe to Norton antivirus, McAfee antivirus, any of those if you feel confident in your avoiding scamability, right? But that being said, they're perfectly fine to do. Just make sure you use a reputable one. There are some less reputable ones out there that don't work any better than the one that's on your operating system. Okay, so those are some precautionary steps. Now let's talk about what happens if you do get a virus or your credit card's like hacked or compromised online. Right? Sometimes it happens, like no matter how prepared you are, like just out of control. So if you get a virus or malware, right? Again, I'm using those terms interchangeably here. Sometimes it can be really difficult to remove. Okay, I'm a techie guy. There's some that like I have no idea. Like it's so difficult. Like even using antivirus programs, like they say they quarantine them, they don't really, and it still seems to linger. Like hackers are pretty smart. Sometimes like you try and uninstall it. You're like, oh, I'm smart. I'll just uninstall that virus. Well, viruses don't like being uninstalled, right? They tend to hide in places. If you run into a persistent piece of malware or virus, the only real bulletproof solution to make sure your computer is completely clean from it is to completely wipe your computer and reinstall your operating system. I know it sounds kind of like a nuclear option, but actually it's usually the fastest and cheapest method if you run out of like the obvious options, like trying to delete or uninstall it if it still seems to linger. And reinstalling an operating system, I know it depends on who you are, but it's generally not terribly difficult. Like, so even if you can't do it yourself, if you're not comfortable doing that, you probably have a friend or a relative, maybe a techie kid that could help you out. Right. And even if failing that, if you don't have anyone like that, you can hire someone from like Geek Squad at Best Buy. They do it for, I think it's like between 100 and 200 bucks. I mean, it's money, but it can be money well spent if you're having problems like being productive with one of the main tools you have to be productive and do your job. Okay, so wiping your computer sounds scary, right? Like I imagine like there'd be a lot of anxiety if I told you had to wipe your computer today, but it honestly doesn't have to be. Okay. There's a few things that you should do. And these things I suggest you do, again, as soon as this presentation is over, is make sure that all your important stuff is backed up online, right? All the documents I use right now, I don't even put them locally. I mean, like maybe I make them locally, but I make sure they're in Google Drive, right? It's super convenient backing things up to the cloud. Not only can you access them from anywhere, but you have that peace of mind that like if your computer, if you drop in the lake tomorrow, right, or if you get hacked or whatever, or you have to wipe your computer, it doesn't matter. You're not going to lose that information because it's backed up in the cloud, right? Google Drive, iCloud, doesn't matter what you use, whatever's convenient, right? Those are probably the two most common. Google Drive too, especially because we have all sorts of Century 21 material, and again, our Google accounts are administered through Century 21 or administered through Google, so you have access to a Drive account there for free, right? Google Photos is another great one. I back up all my stuff to Google Photos. A lot of people do it up to iCloud because, well, going back to that circumstance with that agent I was talking about, the external hard drive that got ransomed for $3,000 worth of Bitcoin, he had 20 years worth of photos on there. He didn't back them up. He's actually still trying to figure out a way to pay the hacker, and it's frustrating for him because he can't. The thing that's ransoming his computer is trying to get him to install something to like do the payment, and it just doesn't work. And he's going crazy. He's like, I want to pay the money because I want my photos, but like the hacker like has buggy software or whatever, and he can't do it. Anyways, a bit of a different story, but the whole point is that you should make sure you're comfortable if your computer exploded today, that you wouldn't lose anything important. And the best thing to do that is to make sure everything's backed up. And Google and Apple make it very simple these days. A lot of things just automatically back up. Like if you take pictures from your phone, they just automatically back up to Google Photos or iCloud, right? Everything that lives in the cloud, the only thing you're going to lose is time and money, right? And those are replaceable. And it sucks. I mean, maybe time's not replaceable. Father time is a pretty nasty thing. But that being said, it's not like you're losing 20 years of photos. You're not losing all your work documents, right? It's just a nightmare to think about that stuff, right? Back it up in the cloud. Okay, so that's ways to get rid of that. But if you've got an online account that's compromised, like if your Gmail account gets compromised or hacked, right? I talked about that a lot today. Like if you fell for a phishing scam or somehow like you know that someone's got a control of your email account, that's not you. What do you do, right? First thing is like you want to change your passwords immediately. This works too. Like if you start seeing credit card bill items or like the credit card company calls you, is like, I think there might be something weird going on here. We want to verify things. Go and change all your passwords because like you don't know how you got compromised, right? It might be that someone like stole your credit card. It might be that they got it through your email, right? Either way, you want to change your passwords, the important ones anyways, like Google, Apple, Microsoft passwords. If the credit card company didn't call you and you notice there's charges, or even if you didn't notice there's charges, you want to be proactive and probably call your credit card company. Make sure at least they're aware that there might be suspicious activity and like that your email got hacked. Right. One of the great things about credit card companies, I'm sure a lot of you have been through this situation too. If you do end up having a stolen credit card and people start putting charges on your account, credit card companies are amazing. You just call them and be like, hey, like I did not do these ones. And they'll just refund them. They like, it's almost like no questions asked. They'll be like, okay, well, I want to verify a few things, like make sure that like, did you make this one? Did you make this one? Did they make this one? They go through your history of recent purchases and they'll get rid of them. So like, if your credit card gets maxed from like, random Best Buy online sales or something or Amazon sales, like you can get those taken off. So don't worry about the financials as much. The credit card companies are great for dealing with those. So if you don't have access to your accounts, that's another thing too. Like sometimes when they compromise your Google or again, whatever email account it happens to be, the hacker changes your password and you lose access to your account, right? Again, two-factor authentication will take care of all these problems. They'll never get access to your account in the first place. But if they do, Google, Apple, Microsoft, they all have account recovery protocols. I went through this with an agent, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Someone hacked his email account. They stole his information. They started sending all of his contacts emails, and they deleted all of his emails in the process too. So he was like, my work life is here. Like, where'd all my emails go? And we went through the process. We contacted Google and went through the account recovery, and we got a backup of his emails from like a previous date, and they actually restored his account to a previous like date and time, so he could like have everything like that he had pre being hacked. So he did get all of his stuff back. So like if something blows up on your email account, just know that there are potential remedy situations, and don't panic until you've exercised all your options. Okay, so one final thing to think about, and this is the super creepy one I mentioned, like really close to the beginning. It doesn't really fit in too well with any of the other stuff, but just something to be aware of, because like I said, it gives me makes my skin crawl anytime I think about it. Hackers can control your webcam in some cases if your computer is compromised. If you have a webcam cover, a lot of like external webcams have a little thing you can flip over. Use it whenever you're not using your webcam. The director of the FBI actually famously went on record a few years back saying that he puts tape on his webcam when it's not being used. I think they actually had a picture, like they saw like tape on the webcams of the FBI when they were like doing some sort of documentary or something. I know he's like in a very high sensitive job, more so than us. Our risk is much lower, and this isn't super common, but be aware it can happen, because I've 100% seen it happen to someone before. And usually the dead giveaway is any webcam that's fairly recent will have some sort of way of letting you know that that there's power going to the camera. There'll be like a light that, like I usually get on a laptop, it's like a little red dot next to the little pinhole camera, or if you got an external camera like the one I'm using right now, like there's like these blue lights on the sides. Like I know it's active, right? So if you see those lights turning on when you're not obviously using your camera, like that's where you start like being suspicious, because nothing creepier than someone like recording or watching you, right? So that's just something to like be aware of. Okay, so that's the presentation. But before I open up to questions, if you slept through the whole thing, right, and you're waking now, and I don't blame you for sleeping through it, because like I said, some of the stuff is pretty boring. Please, yeah, see, Tina just woke up. Please, just do one thing right now for me. Enable two-factor authentication on your Century 21 email account. Okay, I can't stress enough how important this is. Like, it reduces your chance of your email getting hacked to like virtually zero. I've never heard of someone with two-factor authentication getting their email account hacked. I've heard of dozens of people and helped dozens of people who've got their email account hacked deal with it. And it's a nightmare. So please do that.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like our video, please hit the like button, the subscribe, and even the little bell to get notifications, just so you can stay in touch and watch more of these great videos.